I think it's the 12th migration that's happening right now. And so I went up in the ultralight for the training, one of the training flights. And, you know, being up there, it was almost like being a bird up in the sky, open all around, and looking down at the wetlands below. It was just so beautiful. And, you know, there again, the human imagination, training them this way, and the spirit of, you know, I won't give up, we will not let these amazing, beautiful birds disappear.
So there's just a new report out saying that somewhere around 17,300 species are actually in danger right now. I mean, that's what you're up against,
That's
right?
what we're up against, absolutely. And wouldn't it be easy just to say, well, it's a trend, and it's just happening, the pendulum is swinging, we just better sit back and let it swing, and maybe one day it'll swing back. And if everybody stopped, if everybody gave up, then I wouldn't like to think of the world that my great-great-grandchildren would be born into. You know, the forests would go. They've been going so fast, the tropical rainforests and the woodlands as well. So there'd be huge areas of desert. The droughts, which are already happening in Australia and sub-Saharan Africa, would be worse. There'd be very few wild animals. People would probably be living in some kind of bubble, a very artificial life, because there wouldn't be much. The water would all be polluted. The groundwater would be almost gone. I suppose we'd be desalinating the sea for our water. But I don't want to live in that sort of world.
You remind me that about the time you started at the Gombe National Forest, it was 1960?
Yes.
I was joining the Kennedy administration, and we were organizing the Peace Corps, and I made many trips to Africa then for the government, for the Peace Corps. When I've gone back over the years, most recently, you know, as a journalist, it's astonishing to me that what I used to see as green, verdant, rich countryside is now a desert.
It's the burden of people. It's this explosive overpopulation. You know, there are sort of two main causes of intense environmental destruction, and one is absolute poverty, because, you know, what can you do except cut down some more trees and try and grow food? And in the tropics, cut the tree cover down and you soon get a desert. And that's happening all over the developing world. It happened in the US, the Great Dust Bowl, over agricultural use. So poverty is one, and unsustainable lifestyles is another, and that's you and me and all the others like us.
So why do we not have the imagination to see what is happening but isn't yet arrived?
Well, I tell you, first of all, I've spent years watching chimpanzees. They are more like us than any other living creature. The brain is almost the same. The intellectual abilities are extraordinary. But even the brightest chimp, it doesn't make sense to compare intellectually with the average human, let alone an Einstein. It doesn't make sense. I mean, think what we've done. Think of our technology. We've gone to the moon. We've got little robots running around Mars. I mean, it's extraordinary what we've done. So how come this most intellectual being, as far as we know to ever have walked on this planet, is destroying its only home? You know, I'm sure you've read these calculations. I think E.O. Wilson was the first to
He's been at this table before.
I bet he has. Yeah. That if everybody on the planet had the same standard of living as us, then we would need 3 new planets. Some people say 4 or 5 to supply sufficient non-renewable natural resources. But we don't even have one new one. We've got this one. So do you think we've lost something called wisdom? The indigenous people making a decision based on how does the decision we make today affect our people generations ahead? So how do we make decisions today? How will it affect me and my family now? How will it affect the next shareholders meeting 3 months ahead? How will it affect my next political campaign, or, you know, something like that? So is there a disconnect between this incredibly clever brain and the human heart? Love and compassion.
I remember reading a book that I believe you read, Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene, 25 years ago, in which he makes the claim that everything we do is selfish. That is, it's in our own self-interest, and that we exist in this planet that is ruthless and cold and indifferent to us. Is that different from the life of the chimps? You started out a moment ago by talking about the chimps. What is it that we can take from them, that you learned from them, that might help us cope with this world?
Well, there's one way, as I say, is to help us be less arrogant and realize that we're part of it all, and that we'd better, destroying the environment. Some people say, oh, well, a few animals, what does it matter if they go extinct? But I've been to places, as you have, where absolute crippling poverty as a result of environmental degradation is meaning that people are suffering horribly too, and it's getting worse and worse. People are moving because their islands are going underwater, and I mean, we should be able to understand the consequences of our selfish behavior by now, so we can learn from the chimp that we're different in these ways, and we should be able to do more to make change than they possibly could.
Do they seem concerned about or aware of their environment, the disappearing forest around them, the difficulty to get the food that they used to get rather easily? Or is that a difference between them and us?
Well, I mean, they obviously know it's tough times, but I'm absolutely sure they don't know why. Yeah, the forest was there yesterday and now it's not. I could wander there last year, now I may get shot. I mean, they know those things, but they can't work out why.
But they are endangered, aren't they? I mean, you said a moment ago there were about 1 million of them when you went to Africa in 1960, and there are about 400,000 to 500,000 now.
Less than 300,000 now.
Less than 300,000?
That was back in '86.
That's almost 2/3 of them have disappeared in your lifetime.
Yes, and what's more, many of those remain. I mean, they're stretched over 21 nations in Africa. Many are in tiny, isolated fragments of forest, which, separated from others. They have no hope of surviving in the future because the gene pool's too small.
So what do we lose if the last chimp goes?
Well, we lose one window into learning about our long course of evolution, but we lose, I've spent so long and looked into these minds that are fascinating because they're so like us, and yet they're in another world. And I think the magic is I will never know what they're thinking. I can guess. And so it's like elephants and gorillas and, all the different animals that we are pushing towards extinction. What are our great-grandchildren going to say if they look back? And I felt sad that the dodo had gone, but those people didn't understand. They look back, the children in the future, at our generation and say, how could they have done that? They did understand. There were lots of people out there telling them. Why did they go on not trying to do anything about it?
And when I told someone yesterday that you were coming, he said, well, I just read that there are 3,200 tigers left in the world and that their Asian habitat is disappearing very quickly. And he said, but when the tigers are gone, will they be missed any more than the dodo is missed? What difference does it make, he said.
It's just that, if you have this huge respect for the natural world that I have, and the wonder of all these different forms of evolution and these fantastic ecosystems where everything depends on everything else, we don't know what difference it might make if some of these creatures that we're pushing to the edge disappear. You can take out a tiny insect from an ecosystem. Oh, who cares? Well, it may turn out that some other creature depended on that tiny insect, so that will disappear. And goodness knows what effect that one had on something over there. So that will change. And so in the end, you get what's been called, ecological collapse.
So is there good news?
There's lots of good news. And can I start with Gombe,
You may. That's where you started.
Yes,
right?
That's where I started. So when I got there were 150 chimps in 3 different communities living on the lakeshore, which is about 300 miles altogether. And from where I was, near Kigoma, you could go for miles along the lake, chimp habitat. You could climb up from the lake, look out, chimp habitat, few villages. Then in the early 90s, I flew over in a plane, and I knew there was deforestation. I had no idea it was virtually total. Just gone. So this tiny little island of forest, 30 square miles, surrounded by cultivated fields, eroded soil, landslides, horrible poverty, too many people there for the land to support. How could we even think of saving the chimps with so much suffering? So that led to our Take Care program, the Jane Goodall Institute's Take Care. And that program, over the years, has worked to improve the lives very holistically of the people in the villages, 24 villages around Gombe. everything from different farming methods.